When they handed me the BAR for the first time, I said, oh my God, I said, I'm not going to be able to fight with that weapon. But let me tell you, I loved it. It loved me and I loved it. And after a while, it didn't feel like a BAR, automatic. That's what I liked. The M1 rifle was somewhat automatic, but you had to pull a trigger each time. With the BAR, it held 20 rounds in a magazine. You put that on the bottom, you pull the trigger, and if you hold it, 20 rounds went right off. I love the weapon, because when I went into combat with that weapon, it could save my life.
You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
To meet this mounting aggression.
And make no mistake about it, good will prevail.
I was born in New Brunswick, New Jersey. I was born at St. Peter's Hospital. My brother Bill was in the United States Navy. He was much older than I was. I was the baby of the family. And I was in high school, and we were in World War II, and I said to myself, well, I'm in high school, I'm safe, I'll be all right. Well, however, I was not. The war continued, and before I knew it, I was drafted in the United States Army. I wanted the Navy, but I couldn't get the Navy because when I took my examination for the Army, they found out that I was colorblind, and the Navy did not take a colorblind person. So I said to them, what do you mean? And I said, what's left? And I said, the Marines? No, I don't want the Marines. They said to me, all right. They gave me a statement that said, United States Army. I didn't want the Army, because my brother was in the Navy, but I had no choice, and I went into the Army in 1944, I guess, 44, 45.
What do you remember most about training?
Vigorous. When I was given the M1 rifle for the first time, I said, oh my God, this is heavy. And we went through basic training, and before you know it, you become acclimated to the weapon. And after a while, it didn't feel that heavy anymore. But in basic training, we had field courses to go through. Under barbed wire, we used to climb under barbed wire. This was a face of the Army that built you up so that you were ready for combat. Otherwise, if they didn't build us up, we would have had a problem. I liked the Army after I got in. However, that was before combat.
Once you got to Europe, after you'd spent all this time getting used to the M1,
right?
They changed on you. Gave you the Browning automatic rifle, the BAR.
That is correct. I couldn't believe it, because when they handed me the BAR for the first time, I said, oh my God, I said, I'm not going to be able to fight with that weapon. But let me tell you, I loved it. It loved me and I loved it. And after a while, it didn't feel like a BAR, automatic. That's what I liked. The M1 rifle was somewhat automatic, but you had to pull a trigger each time. With the BAR, it held 20 rounds in a magazine. You put that on the bottom, you pull the trigger, and if you hold it, 20 rounds went right off. I love the weapon, because when I went into combat with that, it was that weapon that could save my life.
Amazing, amazing. So on your very first day in combat,
yes,
you crossed the Sauer River.
Yes.
What was happening that day? Explain how you were able to do that.
Well, we had to wait for flat-bottom boats. And the flat-bottom boat, there were 10 of us in each boat to cross the Sauer River. We were under gunfire, and we were under artillery fire. And I remember I got into the boat, and what we had to do was paddle across. Well, I used a butt, the 10 of us, used the butt of our rifle for oars, and that's how we got across. And there was a buddy of mine, Joey Gulo. We were buddies together. Joey was in a different boat than I, a flat-bottom boat. Joey never made it across. First day of combat, he was killed the first day in combat. His boat was hit by artillery. The boat went down, and I think most of the men went down with it. We were both 19 years old at the time. You know, at times I would say to myself, what am I doing here? I can get killed.
How would you describe the sound of that when the Germans are shooting artillery and rifle shots? What does it sound like? What does it smell like? And how do you endure that?
It sounded like you were going to get hit. Boats around me got hit. I was lucky. Did I pray going across? I certainly did. I asked God, I said, God, spare me, and I made it across. The other boats I can remember went down. It was very frightening. I was only 19 years old. I knew of combat, what combat was like. I knew you could get killed in combat. And I said to myself, again I prayed and I said, Lord, spare me. He did. I finally made it across and continued to fight during the war.
What was the most effective way of fighting against the Germans?
Well, one of the most effective ways, for safety's sake, hit the ground. I remember we used to take the butt of our rifle, and the way you hit the ground is you go down and you use the butt of your rifle to break the fall for you going down on your knees. And it was amazing that how they trained us, that when you went down and hit that ground, the rifle automatically went this way. You were in a prone position, and you were ready to fire. And I did that several times. I remember bullets went over my head. I stayed down. It was scary. Believe me, it was scary.
So after you crossed the Sauer,
Yes.
what came next?
Well, after the Sauer, we kept on moving through different towns. And several of the towns that I went through, the Army had already gone through, and I came after them, and the Army leveled the town to the extent that we could march through. We went through many towns that way, so that we could advance rapidly, which we did. And then we had these bridges that we had to cross, and they were bridges that were destroyed by the enemy. So our engineers, our Army engineers came along and built pontoon bridges so that we could cross. Otherwise, the Germans destroyed all the other bridges. And that's how we got across the bridges to different towns. When we went through a different town, there were Germans in the town, and we would go into the buildings looking for Germans to either take them prisoner or whatever. And one thing that we learned in the Army, they taught us, if there's an enemy out there, like a sniper or what have you, my whole squad, in fact the whole platoon, would stand up and take their rifle. And all we did, we couldn't see the enemy. We would fire because we knew the enemy was there. And if the enemy was there, they would surely duck their heads. And we took a lot of prisoners that way, because you figure out a line of men all firing at the same time, you're not going to want to stand up because you'd be dead. That was what was called line of fire. And we did that several times. We went through farms where they had landmines. That was another thing we had to endure. Now, what we had to do with landmines, we were taught this, we would take our bayonet, get on our hands and knees, and probe the ground. And all of a sudden you'd hit something and say, uh-oh, sure enough, it was a landmine. Then we would go around it, but we would mark it so that the man behind me is coming up, and he can see that mark and say, uh-oh, there's a landmine there, and he'd do the same thing and go around it. However, when you're crawling or when you're walking and you don't see that landmine, and I've seen it happen, you step on it, the action of the landmine is going up as you're standing, walking over it. And a lot of men were killed that way. The burst of the landmine was upward, And just picture yourself walking along, and all of a sudden, a landmine goes off, and, well, the best particle of your body was lost.
So how long was it between when you crossed the Sauer River to the day you were wounded?
Around 3 months. I was in combat 3 months. We were billeted in this building on the Rhine River. We were getting ready to cross the Rhine River, and I was billeted in that building. And Harry Godey was on guard duty. He was my buddy again. And I went out to relieve him from guard duty. So Harry and I are talking, and before you know it, there was a bang. Well, that was the bullet that hit me. There was a castle on the Rhine, I remember, as we crossed. I didn't cross. I never made it across. There was a castle on that river, and I'm sure that the sniper was in that castle. The castle was right here, and I was right here up a mountain, and I'm sure he fired up the mountain, and he got Harry in the leg, and I was standing behind Harry, and the trajectory of the bullet was upward, and it went through the calf of his leg into my groin. I went down, my steel helmet flew off, I dropped my rifle. It was ironic that immediately I was not in pain. My body went numb. I knew I was hit. I wasn't sure where I was hit. And that numbness stayed for quite a while. Had that bullet moved an inch or so away, if the sniper had that, there's a femoral artery in your body. And I think that bullet missed it by about a ½ inch. Had it hit that femoral artery, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I would have died. I'd have bled out right then and there. I didn't. They called for a medic. The medics came. It took a while. They came down the hill to that building. I was laying on the floor of the building. They picked me up, put me on a stretcher. They took me up to battalion aid station, where the doctor examined me and he said, "Boy, you're one lucky GI." And that's when he explained to me how close I was to death at that instant when that bullet hit me. Then they took me from there to another station where they addressed my wound, took x-rays and everything else, and confirmed where the bullet hit me. And they addressed my wound and all. And from there, I went to a hospital in France. And I was there for a while. Then after that, I came home. The war was over for me.
Right.
I survived.
So thankfully it missed your femoral artery.
Yes.
How serious was the injury, though?
Very serious. I was rehabilitated for quite a while. I remember I couldn't get up to walk for quite a while. I always laid in a position that was the least amount of injury to me that I was a little bit comfortable with. I couldn't straighten out my leg for a while, and once I was able to straighten out my leg, I think about 6 weeks or 2 months later, I can straighten out my left leg. I was a little bit better. I finally got up. I think it was about a month before I could get up out of the bed where I was wounded, and after I got up and I could walk a little bit, I think I was close to on my way home.
Now that narrow miss
Yes.
of the artery means you've had nearly 80 more years to live than if the bullet had been slightly different. Do you think about that? And if so, how do you think about that?
I certainly do. And how do I think about that? The man upstairs, he governed. He told me, "Ernie, I'm with you. If you need help, ask me." And boy, did I ask him for help. You wouldn't believe it. And he helped me. He helped me to survive. He helped me to live to 98 years old, which I am now. Thanks to him, And if he calls me today or tomorrow, what have you, I'm ready to go because I've lived my life. And I feel that I was one of the fortunate ones to live all these years when I lost my buddies on the first day of combat.
What are you most proud of from your service?
My country called for me. And it was an honor for me to go. Did I know where I was going? Yes, I did. The war was on before me. Many GIs were killed, and now they called upon me. I knew that I was going into the same aspect of what they went through. They fought for their country. They died for their country. It kept our country free. I remember that. We did what we had to do, and I did what I had to do.